Good afternoon to everyone in America. Good evening to everybody in Israel. Um, it's my first time. Is the hearing okay? Yes? Okay. Wonderful. Wow. I feel I should make a Shechianu because my first time on Torah in motion. For for many years, there's a way that I begin every encounter by noting today's Hebrew date. And this is because there's something remarkable about today's date. The date is unique. Today's date never was before and never will be again. And if we think about what does that really mean? If the date is unique, it means that today is unique. Today, it's not coming back. And if we truly feel how today is a unique expression of life, it could help us live it more to the fullest. We often have nostalgia for the past. I try to work on having that sweetness of nostalgia for the present, for today. So we'll begin with today's date. I'll do it for your time. In Israel, we've gone on to a new day, but to allow those in the West to seize the last hours of today, I'll follow the date on Eastern time. Hayom, Gimel Elul, Taf Shin Pei Hey, Zehayom, Asa Adonai, Nagila V'nismachavo. And again, since this is my first time here, I'll say a few words about myself. I'm Yakov Nagen. I grew up on the west side of Manhattan as Yakov Ginak, but in making Aliyah, a more accessible spelling of our name was Nagen instead of Ginak. For about 30 years, I've been a Ram at the Hesder Yeshiva of Otniel in Har Chevron. And about 5 years ago, I opened a Beit Midrash for Judaism and humanity in the context of Or Torah Stone. I'm sitting now in my home in Yerushalayim, where I live with my wife Michal and our 7 children. And just got back yesterday from South Africa, that I was using both of my hats, the Judaism and humanity, and also the Rav at the yeshiva. I was in South Africa because this year South Africa is hosting the G20, which the leaders of the 20 largest countries come together, and there's a component, an interfaith forum, which I was representing the Jewish people. And then I joined the local Jewish community that had a lovely weekend limud of getting together, and as we're doing now, studying Torah. The series that we're beginning tonight, this afternoon, we focused on the Chagim coming up, but doing it through the prism of the Mishnah. And in my book, The Soul of Mishnah, I argue that the Mishnah is much more than meets the eye. Written in simple Hebrew, it's often seen as a means to an end. People study Mishnah as a jumping board to get to the Gemara. People study Mishnah to get some basic facts in general about the Torah Sheba'al Peh. But the Mishnah is a great masterpiece filled with meaning. And if we could decipher what the Mishnah is telling us, we could learn important messages about life, existence, reality, our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu or to one another. So we'll be taking a journey in the Mishnah in our 4 sessions. 3 of them will deal each with one of the Chagim coming up, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. But in this first one, our first encounter, we will be dealing with that very first Mishnah in the book, the first Mishnah, for two reasons. Number one, it's a beginning, and we are soon approaching the beginning of a new year. And furthermore, the Mishnah begins with the topic of Shema Yisrael, which reflects Kabbalat Malchut Shemayim, accepting the kingship of heaven, and a major theme in our Chagim through of the Yamim Noraim is about the kingship of God on the world. So for these two reasons, we will start at the beginning, studying the Mishnah, and again, by asking certain questions, trying to uncover that hidden meaning. So I'll do now share on our source sheets. Okay, and let's see. Let's see. Okay, so are we all together? A thumbs up that we have the sheet? Okay, so that the Mishnah starts with a simple, understandable question in Hebrew, Mimatai koinet Shema barvit, when do we recite Shema in the evening? But if I give people a million guesses, nobody would have thought of the answer the Mishnah gave. A reasonable question, when is the time that we can begin saying the Shema in the evening? Our expectation is that we'll be getting some sort of definition of night. It could be sundown. It could be what's called Seita Kochavim, the coming out of the stars. There are all sorts of ways to define when does the evening begin. I think if we had a million guesses, nobody would have chosen the Mishnah's answer. Misha'a she'kohanim nechsim lechol b'truma. From the time that the Kohanim come in to eat truma. Now, what on earth is the connection between this answer to the question, to the Mishnah's question? So part of seeking the soul of the Mishnah is to unravel that mystery. Now, one way for a first step in the breakthrough of what is the Mishnah trying to tell us could come from taking a look at the Gemara, which gives other possible answers. And when you look at all the answers given to the question, that could help unravel something that could be a pathway to understand why is it that the time of Shema of the night is defined by the time that the Kohanim come to eat the Truma, and what could this tell us about life and serving God in general? So the Gemara in Brachot, Daf Bet says, returns to the question, from what time may one recite Shema in the evening? I'll read in the English. So answer number one, from the time that a poor man comes home to eat his bread with salt. A second answer would be from the time people come home to eat on Shabbat evening. The final answer, from the time that most people come home to eat. Now, these are different answers, but they all have one common denominator. All of the answers are saying that Shema of the evening is the time that people come home to eat. And there are different times. Is it when the Kohanim are coming to eat, what they eat, what people come to eat on Shabbat, when paupers come home to eat? That's step two. But if we think about step one, that Shema is of the evening, is the time that people come home to eat, it's less intimidating to understand that answer than what if we specify the time that Kohanim eat their Truma. Okay, so let's think about that. We've whittled the question down to how to understand the relationship between Shema of the evening and coming home to eat. And this is understanding that is something which you can more easy deal with. In general, in life, when there's a big question, a big problem, you cut it down to a smaller problem, and that makes it easier. So I'll try to deal with that. I'll stop the share to see everybody better. And in a classical Jewish way, to try to answer a question with a question. The very fact that Shema Yisrael is something read twice a day, I think calls us to think about that. To say that the very basic affirmation of faith of a Jew is done every day, I get it. Every day to awaken to a new day and reaffirm your commitment. I get it. But why twice a day? Why is it, what's it about twice a day? Every day I get it, but why twice a day? So any thoughts by the audience? Why would Shema be twice a day and not a daily affirmation?
That's what it says in Devarim.
Right. Okay. So one is that's what the Torah tells us. But part of our seeking for meaning of Mishnah is trying to understand why is it, or maybe Susanna, you're helping me rephrase the question. Why is it that the Torah thinks we should be saying Shema, affirming our faith twice a day and not each and every day? Why twice? So I'll try to share two approaches. One approach would see it as an envelope to the day, the beginning of the day and the end of the day, or the words in the Torah, b'shachbacha uvkamecha, which so it would, and then it would focus on when you wake up and when you go and lie down, which could be an enclosure today. That would resonate well with a ceremony that we do. There's Shema that we say, what's Kriyat Shema Lamita. Shema we say when going to sleep. But if so, it would make sense to have it as the first and last thing we do every day. To have this time Shema at the beginning of the day, but ultimately it's the beginning of the night. Because, as we said, the common denominator between all the approaches, whether the Mishnah or the Gemara, is the creation of the night begins is not when you're going to sleep, but when you're coming home in the evening or focusing on coming home for dinner at the evening. Now, I think this duality, this breaking into two, is resonating with, again, from what you quoted much earlier, Susanna, about from the Devarim, b'shiftecha bebeitecha uvelechtecha v'derech. The Torah says, Shema Yisrael and v'dibarta bam. Talk about the Shema when you're sitting in your house and when you are going b'lechtecha v'derech, going in your journey, your way out of the house. And I think there's a profound insight here that in one way or the other, we divide our lives into two. We have our life at home with our family, our home, our beitecha, our how we live our lives at home, and we have bederech, how we live our house out of the home. One of the slogans of the Haskalah, the Enlightenment of the 19th century, that pushed in many ways towards assimilation was be a Jew at home and a person when you live outside. Saying part of the Haskalah, the Enlightenment, were a bit embarrassed by all this strange dress, look, or whatnot of Jews. So their advice for their co-religionists, okay, at home, in your house, nobody sees you. So that's the place to have your Jewish life. But b'tzeitecha, as Yehuda Gordon defined it, when you leave your house, be like everybody else. Don't embarrass us. Um, so that's acknowledging two modes of life. But it could be done the other way also. Somebody outside, especially if you live not in Germany in the 19th century, but a homogeneous Jewish neighborhood in Israel, in some of the suburbs in America. So outside, you try to have an externally show your Judaism, but in the privacy of your home, you feel free from any um, responsibilities. So in many ways, our lives are divided between our home house mode and our lives are our outside mode. And for each of us, this can be defined in different ways. And what's important to say that in each of these modes of life, we say Shema. We are Mekabel Malchut Shemayim. We accept the kingship of God upon us, is acknowledging these two modes and saying, we want to be a non-stop Jew. We want to be a Jew and live our Judaism both in the home, inside the home, and outside the home. And in many ways, this isn't only about 24 hours and not just part, but it's really different challenges. What does it mean living a Jewish life and being a Jew in the context of my home? And what does it mean living as a Jew in the context of being outside? And this duality was raised and responded to in a moving documentary about the life of Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach. It's on YouTube called "You Never Know," and it deals with some of the more complex. It's not all sweet and sugarly. It deals with the more complex aspects of both of Rav Shlomo and his students. But in very moving scene, one of Rav Shlomo Kabbal's students, actually a woman who lives not far from where I'm speaking now in Yerushalayim, Mima Figelson, I think her name is. She asked, there's a clip there that she asked Rav Shlomo. She says, Rav Shlomo, you have taught us what questions to ask when we're sitting and studying books. But what are the questions we should be asking when we're going around outside on the streets? And if Shlomo says, well, there are two Torot that we each have to learn how to live. And he quotes these key phrases from Devarim about Shema Yisrael. He says, B'shiftecha bebeitecha uvelechtecha v'derech. There's serving God in the home turf and serving God when you're on the outside. And we each have a portion. And he interpreted B'lechtecha v'derech is when you're outside, your encounters with other people. You're sitting next to somebody on the bus, B'lechtecha v'derech, going in the way, the streets. And okay, sorry, this is the background music from the dog. B'lechtecha v'derech. And the greatest challenge is, will you break the ice? Someone sitting next to you, will you say, who are you? Please tell me about yourself. It could be there's somebody that you're meant to meet. Sorry, 1 second, I'll move this source of noise. And there are
You
people
didn't
that
have to do that. Zoom automatically filters out that background noise. We didn't hear it.
okay, oh, sorry. So this is our very lovable dog, overwhelmed with emotion and barking away. Anyway, being as it may, so in your home, when you're belech decha we should be asking ourselves, what does it mean to be an Oved Hashem, to be serving God? And it's about the people you encounter, the doing something which is always not always easy, breaking the ice. Who are you? And there's so many encounters, things that happen, stories that happen when people have the courage to break the ice on the road, on the way, and create an encounter. I have a book currently just in Hebrew called Achayim Kesipur, Life a Story, that much of it is about encounters. Somebody that I met, and one of us broke the ice, created a connection, and discovered that perhaps we were meant to meet. And perhaps in honor of the story, my dog barking, I could tell you a story about that. We had an elderly woman was visiting, and even our dog is well trained and very polite, other than barking. He actually gave her a small nip on the nose, and this, and it was totally out of character. But I took her to the emergency room, seeing if she needed stitches. And there, waiting around, there was a young man there. I asked him, "Who are you? Where you're from?" It turns out this was a survivor from Nova who came to the emergency room because he was concerned that his post-trauma, he would not make it through the night. And since then, we've developed a very profound connection. In fact, that young man actually loves dogs, and for the time we're in South Africa, he watched the dogs. So thinking somehow that little nip on the nose of that woman, that young man felt ultimately is what helped save his life on that night that he thought he couldn't make it through. And more than whatever the emergency we did, somebody who came over and said, "Who are you? Tell me about yourself." It was that encounter that was not only a life changer, but a life saver. Okay, so we've got into the first part of the Mishnah to understand when the Mishnah tells us that Shema, the time of Shema of the evening, is a time of coming home to eat. We understand this is what symbolized that going over from my day life to my night life, my out of the house to into the house. And this is a time to anew make our commitment of our service and devotion to God and His will. But we've only done part one. So it's fortunate we have a lot of time left, because part two is, okay, so there are different archetypes about who defines what is, who is the symbolic figure that defines the time of coming home. I feel that ultimately the Mishnah chooses to have the Kohen. The time that a Kohen comes in his house to eat, and the food of the Kohen is the Truma, this defines it for all of us. And here too, I believe there is messaging, which a major message throughout the Mishnah, throughout the Torah, to use the Kohen as an example, as the archetype of a person coming home to eat. What is this messaging all of us? Because most of us probably are not Kohanim. So what to say that we will choose to determine the time of the night beginning, the time not that the average person comes home to eat, but the time that the Kohanim come to eat. Here too, I feel there is messaging. And any thoughts?
So we're always thinking about what is happening at the Beit HaMikdash and what are the Kohanim doing.
Yes, so we're thinking about that. And I think one of the reasons that we think about that because the mikdash, the temple, is designated to be a microcosm, a small world. The mikdash, and the kohanim, in many ways, examples for all of us. As in Parshat Yitro, it says that the entire Jewish people are mamlechet kohanim v'gai kadosh. We are a nation of priests. And many of the mitzvot we do every day are patterned after the kohanim. For example, in the morning we do nitilat yadayim, and washing the hands. And one of the Rishonim, the Rashba, says that the ceremony each morning to do Netilat Yadayim is patterned after the Kohanim in the Beit HaMikdash, that before doing their service, every day they would have to do Netilat Yadayim and Raglayim. They had to do the hands and the feet. We get off a bit easy by just doing the hands. Similarly, the tzitzit, the garment we wear, and now we're in a time that we rediscovered the tchelet, the blue. You know, Christians had the search for the Holy Grail. Jews had the search for the holy snail to discover who is the snail that gives off that special color blue for tzitzit. And again, tzitzit is very much patterned after the clothing of the Kohanim in the Beit HaMikdash, that also of tchelet. Another aspect of Jewish life, which is patterned in many ways relating to the Mikdash, in the necessity going to be tovel in a mikvah. There are two contexts of being tovel in a mikvah. One is those who want to enter the Har Bayit, the Temple Mount, and Baruch Hashem, we are at times, just like we have rediscovered the Tchelet, Jews are allowed to go up, or in my opinion, there's some rabbis who are hesitant about it, to go to the Temple Mount, and there, when I go to the mikvah, I'm able to say a bracha, because you make a bracha on a mikvah only when it's for a mitzvah, the same way that women go to during the cycle of Nida, go to a artovel and a mikvah, again, acknowledging that the realm of the holy, of the sacred, is the Beit HaMikdash, but also in the Bayit Yudi, in the relations between husband and wife, or as Rabbi Akiva says, Shechina b'neihem, the divine is in that sacred space between man and wife. Okay, so the Kohanim are examples for all of us, and in many ways, and this is true in many ways, also relating to the Shema. Kohanim eat truma, but the Kohanim eat truma, but we eat in our house. But there are many sources seeing the eating in our house to try to elevate it to that status of a sacred site, act of eating. The Gemara says when the Beit HaMikdash was standing, the shulchan, the table of the mikdash, was a source of kapara, of forgiveness of sins for the Jewish people. Now, a Jewish house is a mikdash, and the shulchan, the table in the Jewish house, is like the mizbeach, the altar, or like the shulchan, the table of the mikdash, and therefore we try to elevate our eating. So saying Shema before we come and sit and eat together is a way to elevate our eating, saying that our eating itself could be like korbanot. And please.
Yeah, could there also be a sense in which we view our food then as truma, in the sense that it's a gift? It's not something, it's something we know, we cultivate, we grow, we make, but at the same time to retain that perception that it's not just us, it's also coming from others. It's not, it involves others, that it was a gift that the Kohen receives, a required gift, but a gift the Kohen receives, isn't that a sense? Maybe the food we're receiving is also should be perceived as a sense of gift.
Lovely. The idea of uplifting our eating itself. Certainly, brachot raises our consciousness about food being a blessing granted us by God, by the divine. Some point out that in the story of Gan Eden, people noticed that we're told, don't eat from the Eitz Hadat, but the previous verse says, Mikol Eitz Hagan Tuchal, eat from all the trees of the garden, which some see as a positive mitzvah. Eating itself could be a sacred ceremony, and we're trying to uplift our eating. In the Beit HaMikdash, the Mishnah in Masechet Tamid says that before bringing the daily korban in the Mikdash, which is brought twice a day, the Kohanim would say Shema before bringing the korban. So in the Mikdash, they would say Shema and bring the korban. Out of the Kohanim, out of the Mikdash, would come home, say Shema, and eat their truma. We come home, we say Shema, and we eat our food, which also is like a Mikdash, which is also could be seen as a ceremony of communion, appreciation of the blessings of God to us, and in the eating itself could create greater significance. And in this idea, I would like to bring some sources. One of them from Rav Kook, because actually today is Rav Kook's yahrzeit, Gimel Elul. Okay, so we're going to go and re-share our source sheet to do some sources. We'll skip down a bit, but then we'll get back to what we read. First, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, third chapter, third Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon says, 3 who ate at one table and did not say upon it words of Torah, it's as if they ate from the offerings of the dead. As it is said, for all the tables are full of vomit, pieces without the omnipresent. However, 3 who ate at one table and said on it words of Torah, it's as if they ate from the table of the omnipresent. Blessed be he, as it says, and he said to me, this is the table as before the Lord. We're saying that when there's a spiritual dimension to our table, it uplifts the eating itself. And in many ways, Shema Yisrael, reciting a passage from the Torah during or before preceding, adds that Torah dimension to what happens afterwards. Rav Kook makes this idea even more spiritual. So let's look at a translation of Rav Kook in one of his personal notebooks referred to as Shmona Kvatzim, which is 8 collections, which are 8 notebooks that Rav Kook wrote down his personal meditations. Rav Kook writes, when the idea of raising the sparks is a concept of uplifting, finding the holy even in our mundane. Manifesting the soul as an inner realization, it impels the adept to always follow this holy path, which is the foundation of, in all your ways, acknowledge him. In all your ways, acknowledge him, meaning you acknowledge God, you feel a presence and connection, not only in the Beit Knesset, but even through our mundane aspects of life. Thus, all the actions of such a holy lover of Israel are exalted to the extent that his eating becomes a true sacrificial offering and his drinking libations. Rav Kook is saying that someone who has a more sense of divine presence, appreciation of the place of God in the world, his eating itself becomes like a korban, like eating of the korbanot in the Mikdash. We uplift life itself, and this is through the blessings we say before eating, but also, again, in the Mishnah, when we begin our nightlife, we have our Shema Yisrael, again, raises our consciousness to the divine, to God, and even our mundane actions become more exalted. Okay, so here we have the two components. We say Shema twice because our life is divided into two, and in each we want to acknowledge our devotion, accepting our God upon us, and acknowledging there are different challenges in different parts of our life. And the archetype that defines the time of coming home is pattern after the Kohanim, which messages us that our eating itself could be seen as paralleling the eating of Kohanim, of Truma, which in itself is all are paralleling that eating of the Karbanot, that microcosm of the temple Mikdash, as being an ideal for life in general. Before we go on to the second Mishnah, I'd like to mention another approach to the Shema Truma connection. Rabbi Avi Wolfish, who introduced me to the more spiritual or literary approach to Mishnah, he sees that perhaps Shema itself as paralleling the Truma, as similar to their sources that say that when we had the Mikdash, we brought Korbanot. We no longer have the Mikdash, so we have so the study of Torah is a devotion parallel to that bringing of the Korbanot or of eating of the Truma. I found a very interesting midrash that has a similar beautiful idea that I think also gives us an insight and practical advice about how to say Shema. So let's backtrack a bit to the Yalkut Shimoni, which is a collection of midrashim. And since our time is limited, perhaps I'll paraphrase this relatively long source, but you have it in front of you, and you could all save it if you want to look at more closely later. The Medrash tells about somebody who's a sage who has a son, and each day the son would prepare 2 meals for his father. But at some point, the son was impoverished, and he no longer was able to prepare the 2 meals, which was the way he would show his connection and devotion to his father. So the father says, okay, you no longer can make me these meals, but one thing I ask from you to keep the connection. I give classes at the Beit Knesset twice a day. Come and listen to me. Listen to my lectures. And for me, this will be meaningful no less than when you would show your connection twice a day by preparing a meal. And the Medrash says, when we had a Bet HaMikdash, twice a day, we would bring the Korban Tamid in the morning towards the evening. Now we don't have a Mikdash, but in place of the Mikdash, twice a day, we say the Shema. And one point that I take from this Midrash is that part of Shema is not about our talking, it's about our listening. Shema Yisrael, listen Israel. We should be listening to God. So when we say Shema and go through life, part of it is not about saying things and making declarations, but part of it is learning how to listen to God and try to hear the voice of the divine speaking to us, guiding us throughout our days, throughout our lives. Okay, so I think till now, we've dealt with the first Mishnah that dealt with the Shema of the evening. We'll now turn to the Shema of the morning. And here too, depending on how much time, we'll try to see what teachings we could uncover. The second Mishnah tells us, Mematai kohen Shema bar b'shachrit, from when can we say Shema in the morning? Mishyakir ben tchelet lavan, from the time that we could distinguish between blue and white. Now, blue and white clearly is connected to this. We have in tzitzit, there are the blue thread and there are the white threads. And Shema is a time that we could distinguish between the blue and the white. And in fact, part of Shema, the third part of Shema, is the Parsha of Tzitzit. The Rosh Yeshiva of Otniel, Rav Re'ema Cohen, had a beautiful insight about the relationship between the first two parts of Shema, Shema and Vahayim Shemoah, and that third part, which tells us about the leaving of Egypt and about the mitzvah of Tzitzit. Rav Re'em says there are two modes that we experience life, two modes that we could try to experience the source of life, the divine. Listening and hearing and seeing. Said in the first part of Shema, we express our connection to God and we use the sense of listening. Shema Yisrael, V'haya im Shemoah. It's about the listening. The totality of our religious experience is also about seeing. So that third part of Shema, it talks about leaving Egypt, thinking about the miracles of leaving Egypt, which is a very visible experience, and also the Shema, which is also something very visible with that blue thread, which the Gemara sees as starting a meditation of blue to symbol the waters, which symbols the heavens, which symbols from the water to the sky to God in heaven. Okay, so this is about the tzitzit and how tzitzit is an organic connection to Shema, experiencing the world, experiencing God through our listening, through our seeing. And that's another reason why perhaps Shema is twice. The night is a time of darkness. Certainly in the modern age, we have our electricity. In the old times, on Shabbat, they would light one candle, 1 watt, to add a little bit of light in the house. But the experience of nighttime in the ancient world was darkness, which was a lot about listening. And our experience of day is things are lit up. We use our seeing and believing. Okay, so we have, so it's another explanation of night and day. Earlier I said 2 modes of life, home life and out of the home life. But now we're seeing another approach, which will be about the listening and seeing. Okay, so this is about the beginning. Let me make a point about the end, but then maybe the end of the time is V'gomra ad netzachama. The deadline for Shema is sunrise. Rabbi Yeshua Omer ad shalosh shot, until 3 hours in the day. Shekain derech b'nei malachim lo b'shalosh shot, because princes awaken 3 hours after sunrise. Now, I think many of us feel deeply fortunate that the halacha is like Rabbi Yeshua, that you don't have to wake up every day by sunrise, that we could wait till 3 hours later and still say Shema. However, here again, it begs the question. Statistically, princes are statistically insignificant. Why define Shema? Shema of the night we define by the times that Kohanim come to eat. Why Shema in the morning do we define it based on the time that princes wake up in the morning? Because statistically, princes are statistically insignificant. So would anybody like to comment on that? Why let that statistically insignificant group of princes define when we say Shema in the morning? Okay, some commentators were so bothered by this question that said, "Oh, this must be something only. It can't. It must be something only what's called midirabanan. It couldn't, because somehow it did make sense to them." So I feel the answer. Well, first I can see how educated. How many people read the book The Little Princess or saw the movie? Okay, it's a story about an orphan girl who in England, but one thing that keeps her going is her father. When she was very young, would tell her, "You're a princess." So as much as a total corrupt system of the orphanages in England in that late 19th century, would try to debase her, humiliate her. She would not lose her self-dignity that I am a princess, because her father would always tell her, "You are a princess." And I think this is a essential teaching for the Jewish people as well. Throughout our history, we were humiliated, we were downtrodden, but part of what allowed us to never give up on our dignity and self-respect is we know that all of us, each and every one of us, we are princes and princesses because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is our Father. The Mishnah, in a number of places, because we're running out of time, we won't read all of them inside. In a number of places, the Mishnah brings down as a halachic statement that Kol B'nai Yisrael B'nai Malachim, all of the children of Israel are children of the king. Or as Rabbi Akiva says in Pirkei Avot, after saying Chaviv Adam Shenivra B'Tselem, beloved is all of humanity who are created in the image of God. Rabbi Akiva continues, Chaviv Yisrael Shenikru Banim Lamakom. Beloved are the Jewish people who are called children by God. When we leave Mitzrayim, God says, B'ni B'chori Yisrael. The children of Israel are my firstborn. So we have the inherent dignity of all, that we are all children of God. And we know this because this is what we say all the time. We say during our prayers, we say, Avinu Malkeinu. We call out, yes, God is the king, and king could be intimidating. What makes God a little bit less intimidating is Avinu Malkeinu, the king. The king is our father, which allows both respect and devotion, but also warmth and closeness. I think in many ways, the secret of the Jewish people is more than we're a people, we're a family. And part of the familyness of the Jewish people is both to one another, but also our feel of closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also family, Avinu, Shebashamayim, our Father in heaven. Okay? So this and all this we see from this simple Mishnah that we delve out from the statement that you could say Shema Yisrael even 3 hours into the day, because this princes and princesses wake up late, and every Jew is a prince or a princess. Okay. So we have some time left, and maybe I'll add one extra dimension. As usual, I see we haven't gone to everything here, but most of the things we spoke about today are in my book, The Soul of Mishna, put out by Nagen. It's at Amazon. But let me add something which is not in the book, something that I learned only after the book came out. In the Yeshiva Otniel, Rav was giving a shir to the whole yeshiva and talking about the time of Shema Yisrael of the morning. In fact, what the Gemara paskins, what the Shulchan Aruch paskins is an opinion that does not show up in the Mishnah, or actually, apparently it's the same time, but it is defined differently. It is the time the Gemara says that there's enough light that we could see each other from a short distance of 4 amot. So Rav Re'em gave shir. Why is it that we define Shema as of the time that you could see another person 4 amot? I mean, Shema, we're accepting God upon us. So what's it about seeing another person? And Rav Re'em says something really amazing and wonderful. Rav Re'em said that for the Jewish people, accepting the kingship of God, we do it together. It's not the individual. It's not the individual. It's the community. The same way that the Torah tells us when the receiving of the Torah at Har Sinai, it was ki ish echad b'lev echad. We were together. The great moment of revelation of Har Sinai was to the Jewish people together as a community. In many ways, Shema Yisrael is reenacting that revelation of Sinai, accepting God upon us. Because the 10 Commandments begin with Anochi Hashem, I am God, and then Lo yu Elohim achim panai, you should not have any other gods, which is parallels Hashem Elokeinu. Hashem is our God, and Hashem Echad, God is one. There are no other gods. So Shema Yisrael is sort of a reenactment of accepting of that revelation of Sinai. And therefore, there at least has to be the possibility of seeing another person. And that is why for the morning, there must be enough light to see another person. I was so moved by the words of Rav Re'em that I got up out of my seat. Maybe this was an embarrassing moment, and I gave him a big hug. I said, Rav Re'em, giving a shir and saying a innovation, a chidush, this is a moment of revelation, like at Sinai. So I can't leave you alone. Everyone's sitting down, you're standing up, so I have to come. So I'm standing up, and I'm giving you a big hug. And not only that, allow me to add you something to your words. And I said, if Shema of the evening is about, if the Shema of the evening is about, Shema of the morning is about the ability to see another person, and revelation has the potential, at least, of another person. So what about at night? So I said, the same way that at day you need enough light to see another person, maybe at night it's important, Shema Yisrael of the night, for a couple to say together Shema Yisrael, right? In the daytime, you're outside seeing another person. At home, you're with your family. So maybe Kriyat Shema of the night, it should be perhaps when a couple goes to sleep, they should together say Shema Yisrael. And we ended that year, the year that we studied the brachot, the Masechta that talks about Shema. I asked at the last day for everyone in the Beit Midrash, there are hundreds of students, to get up and everybody look into the face of every single other person in the Beit Midrash, and then together say Shema Yisrael. So here, in a nutshell, I've shared some teachings from just a few lines of Mishnah that we've done together. Next week, we will talk about Rosh Hashanah. Let me add one last story about one of the themes we've spoken about, and then I'd be happy if there are any responses or thoughts relating to what we discussed today. There's a story of a boy standing on the seashore and looking out at this big ship. Someone comes and says, "What are you doing?" and waving. Someone says, "What are you doing?" He says, "Oh, I'm waving to the captain of the ship." And the person looking at this little kid says, "Why on earth do you think that the captain of that big ship is looking at this little kid waving?" And the child said, "I know he's looking at me. I know because the captain of the ship, he is my father." And again, this is something we should keep in mind when we start saying Avinu Malkeinu, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. He is our king, but he is also our father. Okay, so I see we have 5 minutes left, and I'd be happy for any thoughts, any responses to things we've said today. You could disagree also. A very traditional Jewish trait. Okay, so if so, so we still have 4 minutes, so maybe I'll try to add one extra dimension. In general, in many ways, and I'll return back to our source sheet, because there's one thing that we did not get to. In many ways, I see Chazal as responding to Greek mythology. For example, in Greek mythology, Prometheus has compassion for humanity. He steals fire from the gods, gives it to humanity, and the gods are so upset for that empowering of humanity that they doom Prometheus to eternal suffering. And Chazal's response is, the Gemara says that the ceremony of Havdalah, lighting fire at the beginning of a new week, is that Akadosh Baruch Hu teaches Adam at that very first Saturday night, which is really the first day of the new week, just like in the first day of creation, Hashem said, "Vayihi or, let there be light," and there was light. God teaches humanity about light, about fire, allowing civilization to begin. God wants us big, not like the Greek gods that wanted humanity small. Here too, I feel that the Gemara, I'll do a shir so we could see it together. The Gemara brings one opinion that the morning, in the Bavli Brachot 9b, Rabbi said the morning shah is recited the time that one can distinguish between a wolf and a dog. Rabbi Kiva says between a donkey and a wild ass. Here too, I was reading one day Asphus Fables and see that the following stories, which I think explain what Chazal is trying to tell us. Asphus Fables. Once upon a time, the wolves said to the dogs, "Why should we be enemies? You're like us in many ways. The main difference between us is training. We live a life of freedom, but you are enslaved." And the second fable has a similar conversation between a donkey, which is a domesticated animal, and a wild ass. Greek mythology sees the great advantage of being of the wild animal as representing freedom as an ideal, and putting down on domesticated animals like the dog and the donkey as being lesser because they don't have freedom to do whatever they want. I feel the response of Rabbi Kiva and Rav Meir is saying, "Shema Yisrael," the time that we accept upon us the yoke of heaven, our commitment to the service of God, is the time that we tell the difference between the wild animal and domesticated animal, to say that we are domesticated in the sense that we have something above us that we show our service to. So yet again, Chazal responding to Greek mythology, and maybe I'll end with the words of Rav Yehuda Levi, who said, the slaves of time are slaves of slave. The slave of God alone is free. The idea that if you are a slave servant to God, you are truly free, because so much of us, we are bound to other people. We're bound to what people think of us. but it is freeing to feel that my commitment is to God and God alone could free us and give us the strength to stand up to other things, feeling that committed to something which is beyond frees us from being bound to lower entities. And with this, the way I end every shiur is with another pasuk to balance the simcha, the joy began at the beginning. I always end with a verse talking about the fear of God. Sof davar hakol nishma et Elohim yira vet mitzvotav shmor ki zeh kol adam. The bottom line, Kohelet says that what is essential is the fear of God and his will, his commandments, and you're all warmly invited to join us again next week when we will devote one session to the Mishnah of Rosh Hashanah. All the best and good evening to all.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.